So having a one note, if you will, story, maintaining a consistent narrative is hugely important, I think, to getting your message out. And sometimes that message could be, like in Bernie's case, it has evolved over the past 40 years from, 2% of the country owns, 80% of the wealth to 1% of the country owns 80% of the wealth. That is the nature of what's been going on. 40 years ago, we didn't have a billionaire class in this country. Now we do. But you also could be like Pete Buttigieg, whose narrative is a little bit less specific.
Grassroots mobilization moment, and there's a generational change message that's resonating. But now also comes the time where people press you on specifics. Yeah. And you've spoken about how values should inform philosophy, and that goes down to policy. But when you say, for example, there'll be a radical change under a Buttigieg presidency, what does that mean? Because a lot of people, I think, have caught into your message because it feels reassuringly moderate in some respects.
Interesting.
Well, first of all, tone really matters, right? So even as we're contemplating serious and sometimes profound structural reforms, we can do it in a way that doesn't make everyone feel like our hair is on fire. Look, this moment should not be underestimated in terms of its seriousness. I think in many ways we're still underreacting. But we don't have to react to it in a way that alienates others, in a way that makes it feel like there's such screaming that you can't tell what's even going on around
That
us.
makes you a clear contrast to the president.
Wow. So I want to both commend John Avalon from CNN for asking for specifics, and then also for getting his question as soon as it seems to have come out of his mouth. I mean,
he was so excited by that pablum, though. You got to give him credit.
He answered the question, what are the specifics? And it's specifically tone.
And then he, but
Yeah,
for
well, and
someone
then he
like
said-
John
and then-
Avalon, he's just like, tone.
Oh my
it's like-
God.
You mean tone is your specific?
He gave him like 9 different things he could choose to respond to in that question, and he responded to the easiest one, which is like, why are people reassured by you weirdly?
Well, it's mask off time for these people.
Well, I mean, and this is the amazing thing, is that he's talking about the concepts of structural reform. He's talking about the concept of there being a fierce urgency of now, if you will, just to borrow a phrase from the last
Wonder where that came from.
and changey candidate that we had. But I still have yet to hear like the specifics. But it's not just Pete Buttigieg that talks with a little bit of pablum in terms of his own candidacy. It seems to be contagious. Here is Chuck Todd holding a round table about the buzz around Mayor Pete with a guy named Joshua Johnson, who is, where does he write for? NPR. Hey, an NPR guy. And Casey Hunt. And, you know, it is amazing. Brendan, well, let's play this and then we'll discuss.
This feels like a setup. I don't know.
I'm curious what you make of the rise of Buttigieg. Why do you think he's, even if it's just for a moment, why do you think he's having this moment?
Because no one's ever seen anyone like him before.
Yeah.
Think about what made Donald Trump such an unavoidable character on television. We were like, I have never, ever, come in, honey, come look.
You mean like if there's a horse in a hospital?
But it's this, I saw that John Mulaney special too. But it's also the same thing that made Barack Obama so compelling. We'd never seen anyone like him before. And there are a lot of interesting candidates on the Democratic side. I think Kamala Harris still has a story to tell. She is formidable. Obviously, Bernie Sanders is an interesting character, but Pete Buttigieg kind of represents this amalgam of personal traits that America's never seen before. So this early in the story,
But the individual traits they really like.
Right.
And they all in one package.
And he's an interesting character. Like, I'm not even looking at policy or politics or the fundraising piece is important, though, although I think Donald Trump kind of broke some of the rules in terms of how you spend money. But Pete's just like, he's the most interesting right now.
It was certainly interesting to hear Marcos write him off as just a small-town mayor from a liberal college town.
Yeah.
I think if I were running against Pete Buttigieg, I would probably refer to him that way.
Yes.
But
and I'm sure that you will hear people do that if they get around to attacking him.
But he seems to have already risen beyond
without
his
a doubt. I mean,
office.
one thing that Donald Trump showed us is that campaigns have changed. You know, we used to care a lot about what was on the front page of the Des Moines Register, and the way that the media landscape has shifted. It's a sad statement.
Ethanol subsidies. Have we even bothered covering it this year? I have no idea what anybody's position is on ethanol subsidies, and I don't think Iowans care.
I mean, look, I will always read the Des Moines Register whenever I'm in Iowa, for the record. However, it's become a national media campaign to a large degree. And if Donald Trump is reality TV, you know, maybe Pete Buttigieg is Game of Thrones and all this other, you know, highbrow television that, like, the other half of the country is watching.
The beauty of Game of Thrones is it goes high and goes low.
Well, there is that. But seriously, to Josh's point, I mean, he is clearly an incredibly talented guy. I mean,
breathtakingly stupid.
So, first off, that sound, that sensation you're feeling is the same sensation you have when you're drowning. That's what you're experiencing right now as you hear that type of. I mean, Brendan had asked me. He's like, the media didn't seem to learn anything, and you can't. The media is never going to learn anything. The media is not in a position to learn anything. They're not interested in learning that thing. The media is there to make money. And there are undoubtedly individuals in every organization that are going like, hey, wait a second, shouldn't we be paying more attention to this and that? Like, I don't even know what that guy from NPR was referring to. Like, it's. I suppose there is room on a 24-hour cable channel to say, as an individual, this guy's really interesting, but they didn't even get to that. Like, all they talked about was like he was like Game of Thrones.
Well, that's what was cool is that she came on and she was like, hey, this has been tremendously stupid and empty-headed. And then Chuck Todd did the weird, like, I don't even think people in Iowa care about their basic needs anymore. And then she came on and she was just like, wait for it. Wait for it. It's Game of Thrones.
I think there may be a point, and I don't know. I would want to talk to people who are actually on the ground in Iowa, and I don't know if this is the case. But it may be the case that the media is no longer paying attention to those issues. I don't know if the candidates, when they're going into Iowa, are talking about those things. I would be surprised if they did not. They were not. I mean,
I'm saying I think
Elizabeth Warren
people
has
still care about that. Is my point. Even if it's getting less attention, I think people.
That's what I'm
still
saying.
care.
The media may not be following it as much, but when candidates go into these rooms in Iowa, they may. I suspect they're getting those questions. Certainly, Elizabeth Warren came out with a very ambitious agricultural
it's just
proposal.
not interesting, though. You know, it's not like Game of Thrones.
But look, no, I get that part. But it's even like if you're going to do that type of coverage, what is it? That is, what are the personal attributes? I think what the guy from NPR was saying is that he's gay and married to has a same-sex marriage. I think.
And military.
And military. And I guess maybe that is perceived by Americans as being somehow at odds with each other. Maybe, I guess to a certain extent, because for a long time you were not allowed to be gay in the military. And that may be compelling on the Democratic side. I also, what's interesting too, and no one seems to be saying, is that yes, he's a small town mayor. Barack Obama had a year or two of federal Senate, but was barely before he started to run. Prior to that, he was a state senator. So he has some executive, experience. But what's interesting is that we've yet to head into the debate when you have so many people who are talking about electability as to whether the fact that he's married to a man, whether we like it or not, is a liability in a general election. Like one of the, we are only a decade out from when the Republican Party, I guess by the time this election, it'll be closer to almost 15 years, used gay marriage as a driver of their electorate. And the empty seat on the Supreme Court, certainly the evangelicals who came out ostensibly to attack Roe v. Wade, it wasn't that long ago before there was, completely praised city clerk in, somewhere in Kentucky who was refusing to marry people. But it's interesting that is what is, and maybe, maybe the country, that would be great if the country had moved past this. It's going to be fascinating to see if he continues to rise in the polls and can sort of like continue to where he's at, if what happens with that thing. And also, I'm interested in hearing more about his policies. Like he's implied that wants to get rid of the Electoral College. I think that's good because it gives you a slight sense of like, what the issue sets are. But I haven't heard a lot of specifics in terms of policy. But
the specifics are he's going to change the tone and bring everyone together with tone.
Well, I mean,
there's a lot of people in the Democratic Party who want that. Yes. That is the reality.
He's also skeptical of universal higher ed for reasons of that's not going to cure inequality sort of thing.
Right, but that's like, you can be skeptical of certain proposals, but really what you should be doing if you want to be the proposal person is to offer a proposal. Like I can tell you this, Barack Obama won Iowa. There's multiple reasons probably why he did. Part of it was because he had implied and maybe promised some serious reform in terms of agriculture policy that he never delivered on to Iowans. But the other big thing was, I can't remember how many weeks out it was. Maybe it was 3 or 4 weeks. There was a debate, and he referred to Social Security being in crisis, which it is not. It was not in crisis then. It is not in crisis now. The fix of it is super easy. It's no more in crisis than any other budget in the line item in the budget. It's just a question of whether we're going to fund it. But he brought up Social Security being in crisis, and the idea that he identified a problem that seniors were very concerned about. They weren't concerned that Social Security was in crisis, but they're concerned about Social Security. The idea that he brought up a problem in Social Security indicated to people, older people in Iowa, that he cares about something that I care about. And they voted for him on that basis, when in fact, he was basically starting down the road to cut Social Security by cutting the cost of living adjustments. So people have to be very careful. Now, people who listen to this program, I suspect, are going to be a little bit more specific in what their needs are. So here's one where we're seeing that in I guess this was just today, in Iowa, he's calling for a tax credit allowance for childcare.
Exciting.
Now, my understanding is there is a tax deduction at this point for childcare, and a tax credit, I think, is an even is actually more one-to-one as opposed to you can actually take that off of your taxes. So it is a marginal improvement. Of course, it does not help you if you are not paying that much in taxes, as it were, because you're not making much. But again, it's one of those sort of like, he mentioned, like, we may need some radical change. That is not the radical change. But the tone sounds nice. And I want to give credit where credit is due for that.
I'm just happy I can cancel my trip to the Drone Music Festival now, because the news segment we just watched, like the level of the Zen Cohen like level of hollowness that I just witnessed, I don't know how my soul could leave my body anymore, no matter how many drones I listen to or how many drugs I take. So
don't insult
Thank
Tim
you.
Collins, please, though. Everything else, fair point. It's interesting how the lane he's in used to be very heavy on showing how clever and policy driven they are, and now it's sort of shifted.
Well, the people are trying to find where they're entering, and he,
Right.
he is offering that sort of like, I have the on one hand I have the safety of being a white male, because there's some people who are convinced that a woman cannot win in this environment and that a person of color cannot win in this environment. I'm not as clear. I'm not as convinced, frankly. But then he also offers like I think the desire for folks on the left to have some type of social cultural progress, that as a gay man, he provides. And I think there's a sense on the left, that like broad left, that, and because he's a military man, he's going to sort of like offset the potential downsides. And it's quite possible.
Yeah, don't worry, he's not one of those gays.
Yeah, he's not.
He's not trying to like abolish the bourgeois family or anything. It's funny people harp on his sexuality because I don't even perceive him as having a sexuality. Like I picture like a spreadsheet of tax credits where his genitals should be.
Well, I mean, I bet that is not, I mean, I think that's probably not a coincidence. I mean, I think that he probably, I would imagine, growing up, probably was not terribly confident about being out. Certainly as a politician, I don't think he was confident about being out. I can't imagine in the military he was terribly, confident about going out.
It will be fun, though, to see him get the same treatment that the right gave to Obama. Like, Obama was portrayed as this, like, terrifying, angry black man separatist or whatever, when he was just like a very nerdy normal person. I feel like the same thing's going to happen to Pete Buttigieg if he stays at the game,
Right. Oh yeah, they're going to be talking about how he's secretly wearing chaps under his suit or something, and he's just going to go to San Francisco.
The real plan is or
maybe they'll do something like this, as was spotted in Iowa, where 3 protesters dressed up like Pete Buttigieg and Jesus and I guess the devil, and this guy being Buttigieg was whipping Jesus on the cross as the devil is cheering him on. Play this. It's just insane.
Got signs all over hell. Yes, beat your savior, beat him. I hate this guy. Yes, more blood, Peter. Every bolt is a lash on the back of Christ. Your pay grade is going to be great. We have a place for you, Peter. You have no idea how important you are to us. Yes, yes, yes.
Oh my God.
I had no idea that people like that were so creative.
Was he wearing a lavalier mic?
Dude,
it sounds like it, doesn't it?
The guy playing the devil is so in character.
Is that David Cross in that devil costume?
The outfit is totally convincing. Jesus is just taking it. Oh, that's awesome.
I
guess new character in the works.
What's that?
Like, it's time to end the nuclear family.
Right.
Bring the Folsom
The
Street Fair
important thing
to
is
the White
that
House lawn.
when you are tearing apart the family, you do it with a tone that doesn't freak people out.
There's a lot. We tell people like, hey, mommy and daddy, not only is it okay for mommy and mommy to live together and raise a family, mommy and daddy can't live together anymore. That's going to freak a lot of people out. So we need to do it in a gradual way.